But actually meeting him, he's a clever man and he's a performer, so he knows what he's doing. But there's an authenticity to him and a genuineness when I actually did meet him. And it was an entertaining hour that I spent with him, as well as fascinating and sometimes moving.
And we do see him a lot on the news. We're looking at these images now that I'm assuming he's recorded himself. You know, we do have access to his life and what he's doing. Does he differ at all from this image that we're seeing now? Or do we just get what we see?
In some ways, yes, because what you see, although he partly gives speeches and is presidential, and then he, of course, is clever with social media, and that's a clip from our programme where he's doing his own communications via an iPhone, which is unusual for heads of state. But what I found when we actually encountered him, I tried to make sure he was relaxed and he didn't give yet a sort of straightforward news interview asking for the West for more missiles. That wasn't our job, and it wasn't his job in this case. And he understood that. I persuaded him to talk in English, which he doesn't usually do. I mean, he usually does a bit in English and then goes back into Ukrainian. In fact, he said to me as the mic was being put onto him, he said, you know, in English, he said, this will be in Ukrainian, you understand, because his people are telling me. I said, Mr. President, you're the president, you can speak what you like. You're the president of Ukraine, but, you know, this is for the BBC and international distribution, so you're a communicator, so the more you can do in English, the better. And if you are trying to find a word, we could give you it, you know, via the translation. And he gave 50 minutes of interview in English, and you'll see he's very articulate.
That transition from TV comedy actor to president, real-life president of an invaded country in just a few months. I mean, do you get the sense when you meet him that he ever expected that he would end up in this position, let alone as a wartime president?
Absolutely not. And that's what's fascinating about, in Programme 1, we see how he became president. And Programme 2, we then see when he arrived at the presidency, what happened. And Programme 3 is the war. He absolutely didn't think he'd become a politician. And what's so fascinating is to see how he was politicised by what was happening in his country. And because of his fame, and he wasn't just a famous face. He was also an entrepreneur, a manager. He created a company that ironically had offices in Moscow because he was successful in Russia as well. He had to close those offices when Crimea was annexed by the Russians. So we follow his political education, and it was a ramp like that. And then, of course, he becomes president, and immediately, and you'll see in Programme 2, Programme 1 is on tomorrow night, and they're on Wednesdays to come, but in Programme 2, he's, having never had any office, he suddenly has to meet first Trump, then Putin. Can you imagine? I mean, as a sort of introduction to brutal power politics. And so I think he would admit himself, and he talks to us about the fact he dived into a pool and it was too deep for him at the beginning. He couldn't swim. So he's fantastically open. And coming back to your question, is he like he is, you know, in his presidential behaviour? Yes and no. He doesn't change completely. He's an authentic man. But what we got out of him was a highly unguarded description of the difficulties of his life and the joys. He's very funny as well.
And how do people react to him? Because we could see just in those pictures there, the crowd's quite emotional seeing him walk through the streets. How would Trump react to him? How would Putin react to him?
Well, I wasn't in the room when he met Trump, but I've seen all the archive. It's completely fascinating because I think initially he's small, he was a comedian, he's suddenly become president. If you're Trump or in extreme Putin, you think, who is this man? He can be dismissed. He proved that he can't. So I think he is quietly impressive in those big events. In terms of human interaction, it was completely fascinating, you know, directly with me, with our team who we had there, mostly local. He was completely charming and funny and human and able to have the confidence in it being in his skin, and you can see that in someone. And also, his relationship with his wife is fascinating to observe.
You deal with the political that you've been talking about, but also the deeply personal. And I think we've got a clip that we can show as well of Vladimir Zalensky talking about how he hadn't told his wife what his plans were.
Well, yeah, I'll explain, because it was extraordinary. I'd heard this, so I said to her, she described, an amazing interview with her, that on New Year's Eve, the show, which is a big deal in that part of the world, he, as an entertainer, they'd pre-recorded it. They were on holiday with the kids. skiing, and they watch the television show, and he comes on, and we see the clip announcing, as himself, not as an actor, that he's going to run for president. And she describes how he hadn't told her. So I said, is that really... How did you react? And more importantly, how did he? And she said, I was angry. And he said, oh, didn't I tell you, love? I'm sorry, I thought I had. I mean, it's an extraordinary scene. We cut to him and his response, and you'll see he uses our camera to apologise to her.
Let's see it.
I think that